Now, Michael Reid on LMFM.
Just going back to the Ivor Callely story for a moment, I'm joined on the show this morning by a couple of his colleagues in the Senate, Mark Dearey from the Green Party and James Carroll, Fianna Fáil. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
James, if I could start with yourself. James, Ivor Callely, a colleague of yours there in the upper house. What do you believe Mr Callely should do this morning?
Well, Gerry, where do you start with Ivor Callely? I suppose I've just been looking up. I've been in the Shannon now 6 months, and I suppose in those 6 months I think I've probably had 2 hellos from Ivor Callely.
So you don't know him, James?
I don't know him whatsoever. I've had nothing to do with him, and indeed his past would make me want to have nothing to do with him, and even now what's going on is just totally unacceptable and it's disgraceful. And I suppose from my own personal perspective and the perspective of Fianna Fáil party members, the Lent and Brett County Loud has been in contact with me in relation to it. The full rigours of the law need to come crashing down on him if he's found guilty of anything, and there needs to be a full Garda investigation ASAP into the latest revelations, because the problem is, as Shane Coleman articulated this morning, is that there's only so much that the government can do, or that the Shannon or the Dáil different committees can do, because you need to be either in prison for longer than 6 months or declared a bankrupt to actually be kicked out of the House. And the nature of Ivor Callely, like I suppose my own experience with him is, he seems to be a shocking, arrogant man, and even if the Shannon passed a vote to expel him, or if the Taoiseach came out and demanded his resignation, he'd probably stay where he was, which just is extraordinary. But like as Shane Coleman said this morning, Ivor Callely's political career is over, and I suppose that type of politics is nothing to do with the politics that I'm involved in, and something to do with the politics that I want to see this country starting to focus on. And like I suppose as other contributors have said this morning, we shouldn't even be wasting our time talking about this fellow. We need to start focusing as a local community here in County Louth and East Meath and all across the country, focusing on what we need as a country to go forward, whether it's in relation to job creation, whether it's in relation to the health service, in relation to education, and that's what we need to start focusing on.
Mark, unequivocal from James Carroll there. You're bedfellows in government with Fianna Fáil.
It's very interesting to hear such a clear enunciation from a Fianna Fáil senator, and it's refreshing to hear it too, and I commend James for all he said and how he said it. Gerry, I think there probably is merit in dwelling on this issue in broad terms for the moment, because I think it opens up the whole area of the need for political reform, for reform of the expenses regime, and for the general issue of political funding. And while I think James is right that Ivor Callely is political history now, whether he hangs on by a thread or not, the issues that this whole sorry saga has raised are worth debating and need to be debated and need to generate real change in the political process and in the way in which the political classes operate at Dáil, Shannon and council level. So it is interesting to hear what he's saying from within Fianna Fáil. The Green Party are a very, very different party. We have a very, very different political culture, and have been and will continue to press hard for political reform. Our key strategy, I suppose, in the new term with our partners in government is to look at the whole area of political donations and put an end to them, basically. Corporate donations need to stop because it does influence decision making, and we also need to develop the whole area of a register of lobbyists so the people can see who politicians are talking to, who is putting politicians under pressure. That's fine, that's what we're there to take, but when it's compromised then by gifts and corporate donations, the people need to know that and can make their own decisions as to how decisions are made.
Mark, does it sadden you, madden you? How do you feel? Because this is a stink that hangs round, the Senate especially in focus at the minute, but all politics.
Oh, it's excruciating. There's no question about it. I was on this show with Mike Reid, I think last autumn, talking about the abuse of the expenses system by councillors at a conference that I ran myself. So I know I can speak. I'm not trying to sound holier than thou or anything like it, but I saw it for myself at a Nuclear Free Local Authorities conference in Bray last year, how many names were down for people who didn't arrive but who were signed in, this kind of carry on. Now, it's not, a majority of councillors do not engage in that kind of activity, absolutely not. And you can tell by what James Carroll said there, he's from a younger generation, and it's intolerable to him, and it's intolerable to me that this should be going on. But it's more than the odd bad apple at the same time. It's not a majority, but it's more than a bad apple that's at this. And the system needs to be cleansed, because it's being absolutely ruined by ongoing revelations. The Irish Independent are running with it all week, and rightly so, because the system which was introduced in 2002 is clearly too tempting for some, and needs to be made much, much more rigorous. Similarly, in the Senate, you can see from Senator Callely's carry on, which you're right, he's a colleague of sorts, but to even hear myself introduced as his colleague caused me to wince. So there's an enormous amount of damage been done to the political process, but some of it is almost because of the system invites it. And the
but Mark, will we see change? Will you, as the Green Party, the other member of the government, are you saying to listeners today, we're debating it, we're talking it comes up all the time?
Will come.
Will it come?
Change will come. You will see the legislation on corporate donations, the banning of corporate donations coming forward in the autumn term, and I think that will mark a real sea change in how politics ultimately is funded.
And what about the expenses, Mark? Because I'm telling you, will you listen to two? You're both there with me at the moment, and stay with me, James. Just listen to this comment from a listener. I just want to read it. We're inundated with them, but just listen to this one here. Gerry, I know a councillor who went on a convention just a few weeks back down the country. He drove down early in the morning and returned that evening. He got €800 for his day. You can decide for yourself and your listeners what he claimed for. And how I know, I was told myself. Now, when you hear that, Mark...
Well, look, I mean, I've given you an example myself from the conference in Bray, very, very similar, of councillors making claims for conferences they didn't attend. At least in the case you're citing, the councillor in question attended. But it is exorbitant. It has become, for some, it has become a gravy train, and they see it as they see all these allowances as a way of making up an additional wage almost by right, and it's completely wrong what's happening. And limits were introduced by Minister Gormley earlier this year on foot of the kind of story that we were hearing. Those limits will come into effect very soon, and will mean that a lot of that kind of very excessive claiming will stop. But I think there's room for more improvement. But at least there's a start been made on the expenses issue. I think in the Senate, in the case of the Senate, far too many senators are not vouching their expenses. You can claim up to 9,000 unvouched, and many senators have opted, and TDs from most parties except the Green Party. All of my parliamentary colleagues have gone for the vouched system, so that people can see what we spend. If we don't use all that we're entitled to, we have to return it if it isn't properly vouched for. And that sort of very clear vouching of all expenses ought to be there, and I don't see why an escape clause was allowed when the Senate and Dáil expenses regime was reformed earlier this year. This new system came in on the 1st of March, but this get out of jail clause was there, and I don't know why it's there. I think everything should be vouched for, and I think the public demand no less.
James, can I bring James in there? James, would you come in on that? You're a new guy. Did you come to politics because it's a lucrative game? Is that what attracted you in the first place? And do you go along with Mark Dearey, James,
absolutely. Like, I suppose the first thing is I was just newly elected to Louth County Council last summer, and I don't know, Gerry, if you've ever been involved or gone for election, been heavily involved in an election campaign. It's not something you do lightly, and especially if you get elected, you have to put a serious amount of work and effort and time into going around hundreds and thousands of doors, door knocking and talking to people and trying to find out the issues that they're involved in, trying to kind of sell the message that you're standing for. And I suppose just kind of a couple of quick points I just wanted to make. I don't want the show to be a councillor bashing show, because I know from my time on the council and working with other councillors around the country is that a huge amount of them do a serious amount of work, and a lot of them do it full time, and a lot of them kind of have sacrificed their own work. They've gone on part-time work, or some of them have left their own jobs to actually do the job that they do. And while I suppose you see headlines in the papers yesterday, you kind of go, oh my God, that's terrible. But when you actually look, I suppose, throughout the whole lot of it, there's maybe isolated cases of people getting very high, but there's a lot of people who are working full-time. I know, say, a number of young councillors in Dublin who haven't got a job and say they're working on maybe 26,000 euro a year. And then the second point I want to make is political reform. I know others have talked about that this morning, but that's something that I absolutely stand for. And to kind of answer your question directly, it's something that I'm constantly bringing up internally in the Fianna Fáil Parliamentary Party. It's something that needs to be brought up and moved quicker in government, is that instead of just even looking at Shannon reform in isolation, we have to look at Dáil reform, we have to look at local election reform. On one of my last county council meetings, I opposed a motion laid down by Sinn Féin opposing any reform of local government under An Bord Sniff's report. But I made the point that if you take Louth, for example, we've 4 councils in County Louth. In Monaghan, there's 6 councils with 68 councillors for 57,000 of the population. It's absolutely bonkers. The way I believe local government should be done is that we should have one level of local government. You should have actually councillors who are there full-time, who commit full-time to that work, pay them appropriately, and then as you move up the line, then have your TDs and have your senators focus on actually national stuff. And I know Minister Noel Dempsey has been harping on about this for a number of years, and that we actually elect our TDs and our senators for a certain purpose, and then they don't actually do it. They remain as local politicians doing like 3/4 local work. And I suppose that's the vital stuff in the type of political system we have now in multi-seater constituencies, where you have to do all the local stuff. And I suppose I absolutely enjoy all that, and it's very important. But we have to totally kind of reanalyse where we're going. And I know the report last week highlighted that there's 500 million of savings can be made across the local services without even touching frontline services, but actually making them more efficient. And that's where I want to go. And I suppose it was a bit rich to hear a former Fianna Fáil councillor on earlier who's pushing his independent streak, kind of throwing out fluffy lines about different things. But like when you're in the system, the way I am now, the way he was for 10 years, what are you going to do about it? And that's kind of what I'm kind of setting forth.
Yes, but he didn't draw the expenses, James. You know what I mean? He's able to say that if you look, and we can look back at what he did claim, and that he's perfectly saying that he did not play the system or use the system. And I know he is a former member, and I did clarify that as well. But he had very interesting points to make. You know what I mean?
No, but absolutely. But I suppose I'm in the system now, and I'm trying to push for those reforms to actually take place, rather than wait until I'm outside the tent and then start throwing in a few balls about what I want to get done. But the final point I want to make is, so from the 1st of March this year, a whole new expenses regime has come in, and this is actually the regime that has caught Ivor Callely. And I think it's similar to kind of drug testing in athletics and cycling. When you actually introduce a whole new system, suddenly people are caught and people go, oh, this is terrible. But I actually look at it from a different way, in that when people are caught, it means the system of kind of catching people or expenses is actually working. And as Shane Coleman said earlier, I believe politics is the cleanest it's been for 50 or 60 years, because anybody who does stuff wrong are actually being caught. It's on the front page of newspapers, it's being discussed on the radio like it is today. And also to finish off kind of in relation to what Mark was saying, like I've gone down the fully vouched route. I'll produce receipts for everything that I've claimed for this year, and at the end of the year I'm going to have it all on my website about kind of where I've got my income and where I've spent the money, and then people can see exactly where the money's coming and going. And so that's the key thing, that people have this transparency, visibility, I suppose, and that there is an honesty to politicians. And so just to finish off that point, that I do know a huge amount of councillors all around the country who do a huge amount of great work, and I don't think the show should just be a councillor bashing show, because I know that a lot of them do full-time work, and they do more work even than some TDs did claim, you know. So.
Yeah, I go, look, we say that, James. Mark, just final quick word to yourself, because I have to wrap this up.
Would you just forgive me if I certainly didn't intend to engage in councillor bashing. I want to affirm what James is saying.
Yes.
That there are many very fine councillors in Louth and in neighbouring counties, but I am telling you quite straight of my own experience with a minority.
And it's going to change, Mark. Is that the final word? You're telling listeners today that irrevocably this is moving on, and it's going to...
Well, already it's changed, in that there is now a limit on what can be claimed that wasn't there before, but the whole area of political donations generally is going to change.
And expenses.
With pending legislation coming forward in the autumn. And I hope that there is no resistance from the political system generally to this, because the people are screaming out for it.
Thanks a million. That's Senator Mark Dearey there from the Green Party Centre in Louth, and Senator James Carroll, Fianna Fáil Centre in Louth as well.